Hi, the show you're about to see tonight is about Agenda 21. First of all, I'd like to thank the people here at Quincy Access Television for allowing me to show this show. This is the first show of about 6 to 7 shows that I'll be showing. Over the course of time here in the city of Quincy on my show, The Constitution Then and Now, I have talked about how the United Nations has been getting more involved in the day-to-day operations of the United States of America, which they don't belong. With these shows, you will be seeing how the United Nations is starting to creep into our society here in America, and they don't belong here. So with that, I hope you will enjoy this show, and I would ask you that after you watch the show, or after you've watched a few of the shows, that you would call your city councilor, call your state representatives, and ask them to get out of Agenda 21, which Quincy has signed on to. And we do not belong there. Many cities and towns who have watched these videos, many city towns who have been aware of the stuff that I'm about to make you aware of over the next few weeks, after seeing this stuff, has called and they have gotten out of Agenda 21. I hope that you will do the same thing. I hope you enjoyed the show. Thank you.
Something that I was involved in reprinting. This is something that came out originally in 1810 by a man named Noah Webster. We all know him as the great guy that gave us the American Dictionary. He also wrote an essay on global warming back in the late 1790s. He updated it a few times, and it was published in Connecticut in 1810 in a scientific journal. And would you believe that they were talking about global warming way back then? At that time, they weren't worried about the world coming to an end. They were glad that the winters were getting warmer. I mean, you live in New England, and you got to chop 20 so many cords of wood. You know, it was tough business. And Noah Webster simply went in. It's interesting. He goes into the Old Testament and the New Testament. Most people look at the Old and New Testaments for inspiration to learn, and of course, he was a Christian man, but he was looking at weather patterns. It was fascinating. But he also looked at diaries of farmers, and when the harbor froze, when certain flowers would bloom, and he concluded there was warm winters and there was cold winters throughout our history. And so, in fact, Thomas Jefferson was a global warming advocate, much like Vice President Al Gore, except again, they didn't think the world was coming to an end. In fact, one of the reasons why they thought the winters were getting warmer is that certain species of animals were coming further north. Now, you can use that that's why sometimes a little bit of information or observation isn't really enough. There's a species of parrot that thrives in Connecticut right now. Right now, they're a tropical bird, aren't they? But I see them in West Haven, and they're doing okay out there. So a couple of them got loose and they mated, a male and a female, and mated, and now they're thriving out there. So anyway, we put these. This is only $5. Also available. That's actually available on Google Books. It's a public domain. But for those serious students that really want to understand it, we got a great little reprint from the New American Magazine that came out last year, and since then I would say hundreds of thousands of these have been distributed around the country, a lot to elected officials, including those here in Quincy. And you can take one if you want more than one. They're 2 for $1. Also available in PDF format. And I have something that I don't have for sale, but I got a copy of this back in August, just a few months ago, up in Maine when I was giving some presentations. This is one of the most blatant pieces of propaganda I've seen in a long time. It's called Rescue Planet Earth, a children's guide to Agenda 21. Now, there are those people who will deny that there's really any such thing, or what's going on in the United States has got nothing to do with this. This was just some kind of harmless meeting that had no significance and no legal authority, and I'll get into that. But this book was written by the children of the world in cooperation with the UN. And Boutros Ghali, the one that made it possible for the Rwandan genocide, by the way, was the guy who wrote the foreword to that. He used to be head of the UN. Now, I didn't see this on any PDF format. So I asked my children, I have 5 of them, and they're children of the world, do I have the permission? And they said yes. So I put this in a PDF format, I can get it to you. It's also available on Amazon for very short money. Today, you will very seldom see anything bold enough as to link the UN and Agenda 21 in the same document here. But this is evidence of those people who say, oh, this was just a harmless little meeting, it means nothing. So also, I've got this book off of Amazon called Agenda 21. And this is a synopsis of the 1,000 plus page document, Agenda 21, 21 meaning the 21st century. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in the presentation, but I was looking it over a little bit just this morning, and I found something I'd like to share with you. Now, the editor of this book says that Agenda 21 will cover all aspects of human society, everything, right? It talks about women, the role of women. We need the United Nations to tell us how to treat women, you see. So here is part of Agenda 21. Programs should be developed to promote the reduction of the heavy workload of women and girl children at home. So, gentlemen, you need to do the dishes to comply with Agenda 21. See how comprehensive this is. And of course, I'm very Agenda 21 compliant because I do most of the laundry. My poor wife has a very grueling job as a daycare provider in the home, and so they love me as far as this aspect, but that's where it really ends. But that's how ridiculous and how pervasive this thing is. So I recommend you get a copy of this if you're really interested in exposing it. It's, again, short money, just a few dollars from Amazon. I don't get any kickback from Amazon, by the way. So if I did, I'd probably be doing pretty well. Lots of people have told me they bought material from me as a result here. Okay, the dangers of Agenda 21. And I also talk about green communities. So, gentlemen, you need to do the dishes to comply with Agenda 21. See how comprehensive this is. And of course, I'm very Agenda 21 compliant because I do most of the laundry. My poor wife has a very grueling job as a daycare provider in the home, and so they love me as far as this aspect, but that's where it really ends. But that's how ridiculous and how pervasive this thing is. So I recommend you get a copy of this if you're really interested in exposing it. It's, again, short money, just a few dollars from Amazon. I don't get any kickback from Amazon, by the way. So if I did, I'd probably be doing pretty well. Lots of people have told me they bought material from me as a result here. Okay, the dangers of Agenda 21. And I also talk about green communities because you happen to be living in one here in Quincy, okay? Now, I first want to preface some things here. A few people have said, well, gee, Hal, your presentation doesn't really have a logical thread because you talk about stuff before Agenda 21. Everything I mention here is related to Agenda 21. So I'm going to be talking about green technology, there's wind turbines, and it has everything to do with Agenda 21. We, the John Birch Society, and I would like to think most sensible people have a great regard for private property. Our founding fathers looked at private property as essential to freedom. Without it, you have no freedom. You look at the Massachusetts state constitution and other state constitutions, and all of these constitutions, all these documents, Massachusetts Constitution says you have the right to defend your property. And that doesn't mean calling 911 and asking for this policeman over here to come. How you doing, Jim?
Good to see you.
So the Agenda 21 people look at private property as where all social justice begins. So the bottom line is that where we have a complete opposite position. We believe that private property is an essential to freedom, to prosperity, and the Agenda 21 advocates believe it's where all evil begins, okay? So here's a book that came out called Troubled Lands, The Legacy of Soviet Environmental Destruction. Now, why did you have environmental destruction in the Soviet Union? Well, it's very simple, because there was no private property. When was the last time you saw somebody put motor oil in their swimming pool or smash bottles in their driveway? Right? Most people, with some exceptions, take awfully good care of their property. People will have their timberland. I met a gentleman, he said, he lives in Raymond, New Hampshire, he said, which is a little bit east of Manchester. He said, Hal, we have like a 200-acre lot of woods. We've been harvesting timber, my family, for like 150 years. He gave me the amount of board feet that's come out of his lot. In other words, we plant trees. The trees I'm planting will be for my son and so forth. It's called great stewardship and good. They call it sustainable forestry. Well, if you're not using good stewardship, you're going to be out of business here pretty soon. So we don't need the UN to tell us to have sustainable forests or use practice. And by the way, their sustainable practices aren't really sustainable. They're the ones leading to forest fires. They want it to be locked up and never used and just walk away from it. You walk away from your house. We had a house in Hyde Park. It was empty for about a year and a half. I tell you what, it looked like a patch of weeds. And we had a nice garden, a nice yard, nice grass, and after a year and a half of neglect, well, that's what happens to forests too. If it's not managed properly, it becomes in some cases very dangerous places to be. So private property is essential, and just the contrary to what these folks believe. Now, bad policy or bad science leads to bad policy. This is directly related to Agenda 21, and don't let anyone tell you differently. Several years ago, Congress banned the incandescent light bulb. I should say Congress, in its infinite stupidity, banned the incandescent light bulb. Now, there wasn't a UN guy, that someone at the UN said, if you don't do this, we're going to declare war against you. It didn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. But these folks were convinced that the light bulb had to go because of global warming. And what it was replaced with, this thing called the compact fluorescent bulb, which has neurotoxins and mercury, a little more dangerous than the incandescent light bulb. When you break one of these babies, you're supposed to call a hazmat team. Now, I've never called a hazmat team. I bet you'd be expensive. See, the free market, you may want to pay a little extra for a bulb that may last you longer, but you take the risks, right? But no, they banned this by the year 2014. These will no longer be manufactured in the United States. And you know what? The light bulb companies like GE could care less. They were more than happy to move operations to communist China. So a lot of these big corporations are part and parcel of this. They are the ones that are fueling this Agenda 21. Don't let these people say, oh, the capitalists. These are monopoly capitalists we're talking about, or internationalists that have no concept of patriotism. They don't care about factories shutting down in New England or New York or what have you. Okay, so that, and last year in Congress, there was a bill to repeal this stupid ban, and it was defeated. And all of our congressional delegation, the House of Representatives, all voted in favor of upholding the ban. So all these wonderful progressives that have so much interest in the middle class are now making it more expensive to do business and to survive. So again, it's directly related to Agenda 21, although you'll never see that term in that bill at all. What about this fascination with green technology, like the electric car? They're actually subsidizing these companies that make the batteries. And our friend Al Gore, by the way, has interest in a company in California that makes these batteries subsidized by the federal government, and in some cases state governments. And by the way, if you're an environmentalist, and I think to be an environmentalist is a noble thing, as long as people's property rights aren't destroyed. You know, we're supposed to be good stewards of what the land that God gave us. And I think it's a noble thing. But when you destroy property rights, and you lie to people, and you league with the UN, then I got some problems with it. Well, I was told by an auto dealer who was a friend of mine, he said, Hal, the typical electric car will get you 200 miles optimum. That's after you recharge it for 6 hours. And that's if you don't use the air conditioner or the heater. Then you're down to about 190, 180 miles. I had someone else who's an expert. He actually has an electric car from this era. He said he has a battery that Thomas Edison built. It goes back many years. He said it still works. He said 80 miles. Now, it may have limited use, but the average person commuting, driving 50 miles a day, probably pretty useless. And they're about $70,000 to start with. And they're subsidized by the federal government. In fact, to talk about subsidizing, getting back to light bulb, I was listening to the radio the other night. There was a commercial sponsored by the U.S. government. And it was a very clever commercial. They talked about the incandescent light bulb being invented back in 1878. And it served us well, just like a carrier pigeon. But now, you know, we have to be beyond that. Well, in a free market, I don't need the government to tell me something isn't efficient anymore. By the way, the technology they're pushing, like the windmill, goes back 2,000 years. So I wish I could counter that with some real, and I'm sure this light bulb has been improved a whole lot since 1878. I mean, the internal combustion engine goes back to the 1880s, doesn't it? But it's a whole lot better than Henry Ford's Model T. That's like 20 times more efficient. I was at the Henry Ford Museum in Dearborn, Michigan, this past August, and I saw a 1915 hybrid. The hybrid was battery as the initial primary, and backup was gasoline. Henry Ford said these electric cars are inefficient, the batteries are too big, and things haven't changed much. And can it change? Can the technology be advanced? Yes. But the federal government, should the federal government be subsidizing it? No. And you'll see towns that put these battery chargers for electric cars. Well, when was the last time you saw a government have to subsidize a gas station, right? The free market will determine that, right? But these folks do not like the free market system. All right, what about the solar panels? Solar energy, that's supposed to be the wave of the future. This alternative energy is supposed to give us electricity. Supposed to, a lot of these people are saying by the 2020 or 2050 that half of our energy is going to be from wind turbines and solar panels. Well, how's that working out for us now? Solyndra, we're all familiar with that. Obama and the former governor of California, Schwarzenegger, had a nice little meeting, and federal money and state money to subsidize this industry, they went out of they went bankrupt, right, just recently. How about the one here in Massachusetts, Evergreen? $65 million of Massachusetts taxpayer money went to fund this corporation. They made solar panels for about 5 years, and the CEO said about a year ago that we can't make any money here. We're moving, he didn't say communist China, but we're moving operations to China. Wouldn't it be just easy to give those 500 people, divvy up $65 million and just be done with it? Wouldn't that have been easier? And by the way, all over the country, these solar companies are going under. And the energy itself, you want to buy a panel and put it on your home, go ahead and do it. And more power to you. No pun intended, right? But when it's subsidized, I got a problem with it. Anything the free market gives you, you know, it will either succeed or fail based on whether or not these are efficient. And I made a presentation one night, and someone said, the government doesn't subsidize, that's nonsense, I don't believe that. I got an email that very day when I got home, and here's the email. I copied and pasted. Government will subsidize. Let the government subsidize your solar installation. Reduce your electrical bill from solar savings. And it has, that's the Solar Savings America. So you can actually go to this and find out for yourself. The federal government will subsidize your installation of solar panels if you so choose. I think that the average home would be about $35,000 to $40,000 to see them on the side of a home. Now, there's an old saying that solar's okay, but solar's all right, but nukes do it all night. See, the thing, the sun does go down, doesn't it? And it gets cloudy, and it needs a lot of square miles and square feet to put these panels. There was a project in Vermont. There was a solar panel farm, and it was a big chunk of land. And by the way, these solar panels do increase the temperature in that area too, because of land use. What used to be trees or a field, now you get these solar panels. Things are a little bit warmer. Across the street from the solar panel farm was a hydroelectric dam. Now that's sustainable energy, you know, but that, in the eyes of the Agenda 21 people, for the most part, they don't like it. Why is that? Because these things weren't here when Christopher Columbus showed up. So they're tearing these things down as quickly as they can. There may be some exceptions, but most of these folks do not want hydroelectric power. Okay, what about the wind turbines, right? Do you have any in Quincy? I know you've got them in Hingham and Hull and Cohasset and other places, right? Kingston, down the Cape. Any in Quincy do you know of?
No.
Well, here's a picture of an early one. Goes back to the 1st century AD, a lot older than the incandescent light bulb, I'll tell you that. Here's a picture, not the best picture in the world. Well, that's not too bad. This is a picture of a turbine catching fire, which does happen on a pretty regular basis. Now, what's wrong with wind turbines? Well, first off, they're subsidized by the federal government. If they're market driven, they would be up and there would be a problem. They're good about 25 to 30% of the time. If there isn't any wind, of course, they don't work. If there's too much wind, you got to shut them down. And at night, when the demand for electricity goes down, in most cases, except maybe in the summertime, you know, when it's really hot, they're going to shut these babies down because the energy has to be used. You can't store the wind turbine power in a box or like a pile of wood. You know, you can't do that, or a ton of coal. It's got to be used as it's turning. The average one of this size is about $1.5 million, and they do catch fire. The gears wear out. In fact, I met an engineer. He said, our company fixes these things. I said, what's it cost to fix one of these? You know, you don't just put a few gears up there with your toolbox. He said, oh, about $500,000, you know, because it's a lot of work just getting up there to fix these things. Again, it's not just like putting a gear or replacing a washer on your faucet. And if it's on it, wherever they are, you have to have tons of concrete to hold them up. They have to withstand hurricane forces and what have you. And earthquakes in certain places. I guess we did have an earthquake here in Maine yesterday, but not too many people knew about it. And now, if you tried to put a hiking path up at the top of a local hill, I bet you have all kinds of difficulty through the environment. Oh, no, you can't do that. It destroys nature. Oh, but I want to put a wind turbine up. Oh, that's fine. Not a path, but an access road to have cranes come in. The put these babies up. Transmission lines, and by the way, they do kill a lot of animals, kill a lot of birds. And they can kill millions of birds a year. It's not a problem. If an oil company kills one bird, you'll get fined pretty heavily. And also, if you have this type of energy, you get tax incentives, tax breaks, right? But if you use ugly fossil fuels, well, that's too bad. Okay. And why is this happening? Because of Agenda 21. If you don't believe me, read that book I just showed you. It tells you all about it. Okay. Again, there may be some limited applications for this, but it's not going to be the energy of the future, it's the energy of the past. Okay? I say this sort of kiddingly. My dear late mother was a greenie. I never knew it. She was a pre-incarnate Al Gore. Why? Because she used something called a solar dryer, a clothesline. Clotheslines are great technology. Growing up in Hyde Park in the 60s, we were poor. We didn't know we were poor. Nobody told us, but we couldn't afford a dryer, so we had to hang our stuff up. I guarantee you go to towns like Wellesley, these other very wealthy towns that buy into Agenda 21, you don't see any clotheslines. You might see 3 automobiles in their driveway, though. Yep. And plenty of flat screen TVs. Okay, now we have to get into the philosophical underpinnings of what we're up against and what we are, what we're supposed to be. How many people in this room have read the U.S. Constitution? 1, 2, okay. Everybody, right?
A little bit.
And it's not a very thick document, right? It's only, so many pages. It's 27 amendments, 7 articles, not too difficult. How about the UN Charter? How many people have read the UN Charter? Not many people. And these people who support Agenda 21, most of them have never read the document that's defined. This is the UN is the founding entity of Agenda 21. Okay, so should you read something about the government that you want to embrace? Well, the U.S. Constitution does not give you a right. People say, I have a right to keep and bear arms under the Second Amendment. No, you don't. You have the right protected by the Second Amendment. Do you think our ancestors at Lexington Green said, geez, we don't have an amendment yet, so we can't really own one of these things. But we just lay our guns down, our muskets down, and give back to the British. Nonsense. You have a God-given right. And even if you're an atheist, you still have a God-given right or a natural right to keep and bear arms. All right? Well, what about the UN Charter? The UN Charter and its numerous documents that have come out of the UN, including Agenda 21. The UN Charter, one of the documents that came out in 1948, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. You can find it online. Read it for yourself, because if you don't believe what I say, I can be backed up pretty easily. In fact, my next slide, I'm going to update my slide and actually quote from this, I think it's section Article 29. Under the UN, you have the right to freedom of religion, freedom of speech. Doesn't say anything about right to keep bear arms, though. That's not in there. The right to a job, even the right to a vacation. Isn't that wonderful? But if you read a little bit further, it says, and these rights can be qualified out of existence. And by the way, you don't have the right to criticize the UN. Well, you know what? We're going to criticize it. I'm going to criticize it till the day I die. See? So these 2 documents are complete opposites. One of them protects God-given rights. The other one gives rights and can take those away. That's a fundamental difference. So in a week from now, people are going to be celebrating UN Day. And many towns and cities around Massachusetts and other parts of the country are pushing these resolutions praising the UN. They need to be pushing resolutions condemning the UN. Okay? In fact, our most recent New American has some great articles and even an interview of the man who produced that movie on UN, Me, I think it's called. There's another document. It's called the Communist Manifesto. We've all heard of that. We may have heard about it in school. We may have even read it. Well, there are 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto. And by the way, the manifesto used to be called the Socialist Manifesto, but for the first 15 or so years, Marx didn't want to put the name communist on it, because there were some people running around Europe that were called communists that had a bad connotation. Well, the 10 planks, basically Marx said, adopt these 10 planks and you have yourselves a socialist country. First plank, abolition of property, meaning private property, right? That can be Agenda 21 in a nutshell, right there. I won't go into all the other planks, but how about a heavy progressive income tax? Sound familiar? Yep. By the way, Karl Marx said that communism abolishes all eternal truths. Now, what could be good about something that abolishes all eternal truths? Don't tell me that it's good in theory. It's not good in theory. The UN is the parent organization of Agenda 21. This is the building. I took a visit there about 7 or 8 years ago. I had to hold my nose and butt my lip a little bit. There's a handgun as you go into the entrance where the tourists go that's put in a knot. It's a civilian handgun, and they quote a portion of the Bible. They will beat their swords into plowshares. But it doesn't say the rest. And he, meaning the Lord God Almighty, not Boutros Ghali or Kofi Annan or Ban Moon, will be the ruler of nations, you see. So they are committed to disarming the world, the private individual. This is what we call the house that Hiss built. Well, who is this man named Alger Hiss? The man who wrote the UN Charter. You see, somebody had to write it. It didn't evolve. Like they think we evolved from the swamps. The UN Charter belonged to the swamp, but it didn't evolve. Somebody wrote it. A man named Alger Hiss. Some people have no idea. They may have heard of him or some recollection. I've been to the UN bookstore at the headquarters there. Not one mention of this man. The man who was the founding acting general secretary who wrote the charter. You see the photo in the center, that's a mugshot from the prison because he was found guilty of perjury. He was a Soviet agent. He worked for Stalin. He served the interest of the worst dictator perhaps in the history of the world, definitely the 20th century. And that's saying something. He had a lot of competition. But he probably, next to Mao, he's probably behind Mao Zedong. And he was a man of privilege, folks. He wasn't some point in a city that he was exploited by the capitalists and he bought into communism, some romantic ideologue, what have you. He was a hardcore, he was a upper middle class, became a communist at Columbia University, a college of the privileged. Not everybody goes to Columbia University. This was back in the 30s when he went there, right? Or late 20s. He was an advisor of Roosevelt, and you may see pictures of Roosevelt and Stalin and Churchill at Yalta, and this old young Alger. I can imagine what he said to Roosevelt. Hey, Mr. President, give Stalin everything he wants, because that's exactly what happened. So I say to people, what good can come from the pen of a man like this? Now, we're told if you go to your typical public school and many private schools, and unfortunately Christian and parochial type schools too, they will praise the UN. They have Bottle UN Day. They have classrooms all praising this UN. They don't talk about the things I'm talking about tonight. We're told that if it wasn't for the UN, well, there would have been a World War III. Really? We've been at war ever since. Here's an example of UN peacekeepers in action. The folks that will be implementing Agenda 21, okay, if we allow it. Now, these folks, you notice the pigmentation of these young men? Happen to be white guys. They're Belgian soldiers. And they're torturing a black man, a Somalian national. He's a civilian. And they're enjoying it. They seem like, hey, we're getting paid for this too. Where was Jesse Jackson when this was going on? Where's Al Sharpton? Nowhere to be found. Right? You heard about the Rodney King incident, and maybe you should have. Time and time again until riots broke out, right? But you didn't hear about this because they want to cover up these kinds of crimes. There are many kinds of these crimes. This is just one. Now, my dad was a World War II veteran. He was in Germany when they captured Hermann Goering, right? He was a second or third top Nazi. They didn't do this to him, but they did this to this poor kid. I don't know what he did to deserve that. I served in the U.S. Army. And one of the things I learned in basic training is that we never obey an unlawful order. That's an unlawful order. You see, we say no to this. They didn't get the memo. Or maybe the UN encourages this kinds of things. Well, it does, folks. Okay? By the way, the Village Voice broke this story, a very liberal New York-based newspaper. So there are a lot of people on the left, very good individuals too. What about Gatanga? The UN Charter said it will have nothing to do with internal affairs in a nation, right? Gatanga was a province of what used to be the Belgian Congo. It's now Zaire. It was taken over, thanks to the UN and other parts of other countries of the world, by a Moscow-trained man by the name of Patrice Lumumba, and a province, a peaceful province that had Muslims, Jews, and Christians, and a growing middle class. The leader, a black man, Mose Shombe, said, I'm seceding from chaos. So what happened? The UN went in and bombed hospitals. It murdered, it raped, and mostly white soldiers, by the way, in this case. Okay? I knew a man that was part of the mission. He said he was just a crew member on a U.S. Air Force cargo plane. He had no idea. He was just flying stuff in, flying out. He didn't find out until he joined the John Birch Society and found out what exactly this was about. These are some of the pictures that I dare show you in public. What they did was so disgusting, so brutal, and the world, it was covered up. Most people have no idea what was done. There's a great video called Katanga. It's on YouTube. I put one up there, and other people put it up too. So see for yourself what our beloved UN does to nations that don't buckle under. And by the way, Katanga had uranium. That was probably the reason why they wanted it back, you see. Here's another example of UN troops in action. You heard of Rwanda. You know, the UN was complacent in this genocide. Boutros Ghali made sure that the Hutus got weapons, and close to 1 million people were killed in a very short time. And that some of these poor Tutsis were telling the UN soldiers, shoot us now, would rather be shot than hacked to death, and shoot my children first. The Canadian general that tried to intervene, a UN general, who was a noble soul, he was refused permission to intervene to prevent this by the man that led the UN mission, the civilian mission. His name was Kofi Annan. Later became the head of the UN. It involved that despicable scandal, oil for food in Iraq. The corruption is so endemic at the UN, it's disgusting. And it isn't just the corruption. Its foundation is rotten, you see. What's the proverb say? The foundation is rotten, you know, you can't build on it, right? I'm paraphrasing, it's not exactly that. Here's another interesting book called Death by Government, written by a liberal professor, University of Hawaii. He probably knows Michael Dukakis. You remember Dukakis went out there after he lost his bid for president? But the thing is, he probably came back. I think he's back now. Anyway, he would have learned something from this guy. Hopefully, he might have compared notes. Professor R.J. Rummel, he documented that more people have been murdered by their governments in peacetime in the 20th century than all the wars of the 20th century. World War I, World War II, Korean War, Vietnam War, and all what happened in other parts of the world. And he didn't say this, but I'm adding a sentence. Most of these nations have been members of good standing at the UN. And some of this genocide happened in Communist China from the 40s up until present day. In 1971 to 72, Taiwan was kicked out of the UN, and China, Communist China, when Mao was still the head of it, was welcomed in with the role of the red carpet for them, and they praised the low hell, not high heaven. They praised Mao Zedong and his butchers at the UN. The UN also enables terrorists. You know, the late Yasser Arafat the PLO had observation status at the UN, and was it 1904, 05? Syria became a member of the Security Council. You know, so it's a fraud, folks. Loads of poverty. Okay, Hal, you made your case, the UN's rotten, but they do some good things after all. Well, Al Capone had soup kitchens in Chicago during the Depression. And I'm sure if you're hungry and you were being fed by his soup kitchens, you probably were hard-pressed to criticize the man. But nevertheless, he was a criminal. No one's going to deny that. What he did in Chicago was nothing compared to what these folks do. So the UN does some good things here and there. I would say that most of the stuff can be done by the private sector, like the Red Cross and the various philanthropical, that's a tough word to say fast, philanthropical organizations, church groups, or what have you, Red Cross, Doctors Without Frontiers, and so forth. But The Lords of Poverty was written by a journalist from England, another liberal, and he said that the lending institutions, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, prop up dictators, and then they enforce austerity measures on the people. You remember the Brazilian rainforest? How was that funded? Funded by the UN. Okay, give you an example. So they create the problem, and they solve the problem. There was a great book that was written in 1850 called The Law by a Frenchman, Frederick Bastiat. He said that the antidote and the poison are created in the same laboratory. Nothing new under the sun. Okay, Agenda 21, getting into the actual aspects of Agenda 21. 1987, there was a meeting, the World Commission on Environment and Development, Our Common Future. This is where the term sustainable development actually came from. I mean, the word sustainable has been around a long time, and it's not a bad word in itself. They define sustainable development as meeting the needs of this present generation without infringing on the needs of the future generations. Now that sounds reasonable. They use the word needs, by the way, not wants and desires. See, I need water. I don't need coffee or Coca-Cola, right? I may need transportation. I might need shoes, but I don't need a car. You see, so needs are basic things, right? But when they give the definition to themselves, it means a whole lot, and I'm going to get into that. This commission was chaired by a woman, Dr. Gro Harlem Brundtland. She was also, at the time, the vice president of the World Socialists. They didn't get the vice president of the von Mises Foundation, the vice president of the NRA, the vice president of the John Birch Society. They got a vice president of the World Socialists. Well, why else would they have but a socialist to promote socialism or communism? About, 10 or 11 years before that, there was a meeting in Vancouver, Connecticut, British Columbia. And there isn't a Vancouver, Connecticut, by the way. This was called the Commission on Commission on Habitat Humanity. They urged all countries establish a policy on human resettlement. And that's in Agenda 21. You can read it in Agenda 21. Okay. Now, in 1992, in June of 1992, was their first Rio conference. They just celebrated the 20th anniversary, and they had another meeting. At this meeting, there was about, they estimated 50,000 attendees. Leaders, elected officials, appointed officials, rock musicians. Bill Jaffa, who wrote the article that I showed you a little earlier, was one of the journalists there from the New American. He was actually on hand there. He wrote this article. He said in his article that he published in '92, he said there was communists, socialist internationals, globalists, and diapered swamis. A little bit of sense of humor there. He was at the meeting in Rome where they hashed the World Court a couple years later. He said some of the same diapered swamis that were at the Rio conference were at this one. Like rent a swami, I guess, or rent an indigenous person. In other words, it's a fraud and a hoax. It was just for the boobs to watch and think, oh, this is wonderful, we're saving the planet. And the Beach Boys were there too, by the way. Mikhail Gorbachev was there. And two diapered swamis that are very well known to us. One of them was vice president at the time, he was Senator Al Gore, who's become a billionaire lying mainly to children about global warming, man-made global warming, and a man named John Kerry, who we refer to as John Live-Shot Kerry. And by the way, John Kerry is such a wonderful humanitarian. He doesn't like to pay taxes on his boat, though. His yacht. By the way, he has a yacht. Yachts aren't very sustainable unless you're one of the elite. By the way, maybe we should occupy the yacht club. You know, we have a right to the yachts. You see, he registers his yacht in Rhode Island because it's a little bit cheaper there, right? Yeah. And didn't he have a fire hydrant in front of his home in the back bay, Beacon Hill in Boston? Yeah. He had that fire hydrant removed because it didn't look. He wanted his friends to park in front. It didn't look aesthetically pleasing, right? Well, who was behind this meeting? Well, let me get into Agenda 12. Let me just quote from this book first here. I showed this book a few minutes earlier. This is the editor of the book, Paul Sitarz. He said, effective execution of Agenda 21 will require a profound reorientation of all human society, unlike anything that the world has ever experienced. A major shift in the priorities of both governments and individuals, and an unprecedented redeployment of human and financial resources. This shift will demand that a concern for the environmental consequences of every human action be integrated into individual and collective decision-making at every level. That is a bit of a hardcore agenda. This isn't just some harmless little thing that came out of this meeting. Now, Agenda 21 is not a treaty, and it's not law. The people who criticized us, oh, that's not law, it has no effect. Well, it does. And that makes it worse. If it was a treaty, it would have been debated, and it probably would have been shot down by the Senate, okay? But this makes it worse, and I'll go into how it's being implemented. Well, somebody had to be involved in this, Agenda 21. It just didn't come up. People have to plan this, right? It just didn't happen. People just didn't show up on Rio and have a meeting. Well, the man behind this particular meeting was Maurice Strong. He was the General Secretary of the United Nations Environmental Plan, UNEP, I think it's referred to, program. He is a very interesting individual, another Canadian oil man billionaire. A lot of billionaires involved in this. There's lots of money in this green mafia, this green hoax and fraud, by the way. And many people are latched onto it, not because they're committed Al Goreites, but because of making money. Plenty of it too. Maurice Strong, at the age of 14, goes out to sea. Had very little formal education, which generally is a good thing, by the way, because you learn a whole lot more outside the hallowed halls of Ivy League Hall, you see. At 18, he's a passcode clerk at the UN, basically a security guard, right? Nothing wrong with that. I was a security guard when I first got out of the Army. I didn't know David Rockefeller, however, because by the time he was 25, he's leading an oil company and a big financial company, because he became a sort of a mentor. David Rockefeller took him under his wing. He's up in his 80s now. He wasn't that much younger than David. Maurice Strong, in 1990, was interviewed by a journal called West, British Columbia Journal. I used to have a copy of it when it first came out. I couldn't find it online. Maybe somebody can. I looked hard. I couldn't find it. But you'll find this quote everywhere. Now picture this. Here's this fellow, this guy riding in his limousine. He has lots of buildings, by the way. He owns real estate all over the world. He's a dedicated New Ager, you see. There's folks who in the media love to criticize Christianity. They're always, Bill Maher, always knocking Christians. They take the most, some of the more absurd people and say, they all believe this, they're bad. I've never heard them knock New Age movement. They never said, Hillary Clinton had seances in the White House and conjured up the spirits of Eleanor Roosevelt. They never ridicule that, but they ridicule Christians. Why is that, folks? How come he isn't exposed as some kind of goofy New Ager? He's not, okay? But he thinks he's one of these, he speaks to enlightened masters, and they're giving him suggestions and ideas, you see. And he's above everybody else. He and his global elite, you see. They believe this, okay? He said he's writing a book, and this is the theme, that the industrial civilizations will collapse. Isn't it our responsibility to bring that about? He was serious about this. The reporter was saying, my God, this guy can do it. He just happens to be the head of the World Economic Forum. At the UN conference in Rio, he's addressing this large group, and he said the biggest threat in the world, it isn't fundamental Muslims, it isn't nuclear missiles from Moscow pointing at us, it's the American middle class. Anybody in this room fit that description? Or maybe would like to? Or maybe we're here because we're working 2 jobs, we're barely middle class, right? Why are you a big threat? Because you have single-family homes. How many people live in a single-family home? Yeah, a couple of people, right? Or maybe no people that do. How many people drove a car to get here? How many people had red meat, or even the last week or so? Oh, come on, fess up, yeah. Okay, how many people will go home in the hot weather to an air-conditioned apartment or house? In cold weather, we'll probably have a burner on, a furnace on, that probably burns coal or oil, most likely oil, right? Yeah, I would say probably everybody in this room, right? Your patterns are unsustainable. This is why most of the Agenda 21 projects are aimed here in the United States. They look at you as enemy number 1. And these folks are serious, by the way. This isn't some kind of silly game that means nothing. Another one of the advocates there, or attendees, was a man named Jacques Cousteau. We all heard of Jacques Cousteau. I used to watch his show as a child. It may even be on in TV land, or maybe, I don't know if the Sun's picked it up. French hero, World War II hero, and an innovator in submarine technology, to his credit. That's where my admiration ends. He's since deceased, by the way. He said this in 1991, and you can find this online, UNESCO Courier. By the way, UNESCO stands for United Nations Education, Science, Cultural Organization. See, the UN isn't just interested in peace. They want to control the science, the culture, the education. They want to control even the spiritual aspects. They have something called the meditation room at the UN, right? Doesn't that sound nice? People can meditate about world peace and how, well, it was maintained, and maybe still be, by something called the Lucius Trust. Ever hear of that? It used to be called the Lucifer Trust. But Lucifer still has a negative connotation. There's some bad press there, Lucifer. So they changed the name of the Lucifer Foundation, Lucifer Trust. At the Rio conference, he said this. American-born child environmentally is too expensive to maintain to his or her adulthood in a world economy. American women must be subjected to some manner of regulation beyond licensing and mandatory abortion practices. Speech at the Earth Summit, 1992. He was widely applauded. And getting back to his UNESCO interview, in 1991, he said that one American tires the earth much more than 20 Bangladeshis. World population must be stabilized, and to do that, we must eliminate 350,000 people per day. Isn't that why so many politicians all support Planned Parenthood? Or think they have to? Planned Parenthood is one of the organizations, by the way, racist in its roots. Right? Look it up. Look, there's a website called Planned Parenthood, if you don't believe me. I heard an ad on the way out here from one of the people running for Congress, how proud he is supporting Planned Parenthood. Okay, it's almost like we have to because it's part of Agenda 21. All right? Now, out of Agenda 21 came about 5 or 6 different things. One of them, out of Rio came about 5 or 6 different things. Agenda 21, the Biodiversity Treaty, the Climate Change Protocol. Agenda 21 was signed by all of the nations and participating, about 160, 157 nations. George Bush, the elder George Bush, did not attend the meeting, but he was on a boat offshore, from what I understand, and he very happily signed the 1,000-plus page document. You think, well, he was a conservative Republican, World War II veteran, he wouldn't do that. Well, he did, folks. And what he didn't say is that this was now law. A president can't sign law from the UN, make it law, but he said every arm of our government will implement Agenda 21. Even our Navy and our military is implementing Agenda 21. Sustainable Navy. I thought the Navy was there to kick butt when need be, right? No, they have to worry about being sustainable. Sustainable wars, I suppose. Yeah. It sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? And it is, but it's dangerous because it's being done. By the way, some of you may have remembered in 1990 when George Bush got in front of a joint session of the Congress, and he said, he's talking about the Gulf War, what will come out of here is a real chance for a new world order, and a UN is envisioned by its founders. Well, I just mentioned the founder a little while ago, didn't I? He was the head of the CIA. He went to Yale. I went to a junior college. How come I know who the founder of the UN was and he didn't? I think he got the memo somewhere along the line. Okay? I visited the Bush Library down in College Station, Texas, and he had a speech when he ran for Congress. I think he served one term in Congress. He won, I think, one term. He was running against a John Birch, by the way. No, he ran against a John Birch for a county seat. That was his first time running for office. Anyway, the speech he has, a handwritten speech. He's ridiculing the notion that he's somehow something to do with the Rockefeller elite, the Rockefeller Republicans. Well, when you walk into the library, you see the people who donated to the library, Rockefeller brothers, Rockefeller, and some Muslims, some sheiks in Saudi Arabia. Yeah, it's very interesting. I didn't have a camera at the time. I should have took a little video clip. But if you get down there, you can see for yourself. So he signs it. A year later, William Jefferson Clinton becomes president, serves 2 terms, and he establishes the Presidential Office on Sustainable Development. And did I put that slide in there? He gave the APA, the American Planning Association, $1 million to come up with a plan. How can we implement Agenda 21 in the United States through every town and city and county and state? And they came up with this 350, 400-page document, which you can find online, free. I went to Amazon, they didn't have any available, but if you do a search online, you find it in a PDF format. There are 8 plans, 8 goals, and one of them includes population stabilization. Now, I don't know about you, but I've read my Constitution. I don't see that as one of the things that the president has to do. But it's in there. Okay, read it for yourself. Then we see, Mr. Clinton also had a man. He had one man that was not a government official, that was part of his board of advisors. His name was Kenneth Lay of Enron. Remember Enron scandal? Oh, Enron, they're a bunch of right-wing meanies trying to, no, they were right-wing greenies. And they were tied to the Clinton administration, okay? Left-wing greenies, I should say. And it doesn't really matter what you call yourself. We get Republicans that I know personally that are buying into this stuff, that should know better, that refuse to do anything to oppose it, okay? George H.W. Bush, also a big supporter of this, and our current president, Obama. Last year he passed a Rural Councils Act to implement Agenda 21 in the world. He doesn't say Agenda 21, but it's about sustainable development in the rural communities. In other words, get the people off the land, get them into the cities, right? And again, it's not going to happen overnight. It's gradual. you see. And 100 years, Agenda 21, 21 means 100 years, okay? So I showed you this document. Here's one of the advisors to Mr. Clinton, who's still very much involved in promoting Agenda 21. His name is J. Gary Lawrence. In 1996, he was speaking to a group in England of fellow Agenda 21 supporters, and he said this: participating in a UN-advocated planning process would very likely bring out many of the conspiracy-fixated groups. Gee, I wonder why. And individuals in our society. This segment of our society who fear a one-world government and a UN invasion of the United States through which our individual freedom would be stripped away would actively work to defeat any elected official who joined the conspiracy. His word, conspiracy, by the way. So let's call our processes something else, such as comprehensive planning, growth management, or smart growth. They're even changing the terms now because these terms are buzzwords. So when you see smart growth, you know it's Agenda 21. So they now have different development areas or benefit areas or whatever they're calling them. The APA, the American Planning Association, actually has a guideline how to deflect the, and they actually have workshops on how to deflect people like us, how to minimize our influence. And we're getting a lot of it, by the way, in the last year or so. So basically he said, we need to lie to people and deceive them to promote this. And by the way, I want to qualify this too. He talked about one world government and a UN invasion of the United States. We don't have to worry about guys in blue helmets coming in with Uzis or AKs into our country. I hope it never happens. It will never happen. It's coming in because of our neighbors, our people who are friends. People in Quincy brought it in and probably didn't even know what it was. And when you bring this to their attention, they'll probably deny it because they're guilty. Okay? Some of them will have realized they're wrong and they'll reverse it. Some of them will promise money and they will not refuse because they'll lose that money. It could be the Sunday school teacher that you grew up with that now is an elected official that brought it in. Or maybe the babysitter. Maybe your brother or sister or your neighbor that brought it in. That's how it's happening. It's not happening by UN. Again, there's no UN mandate. Quincy will not be invaded by the UN troops if they pull out of green communities. That's not going to happen. And our detractors will kind of ridicule this. Oh, you think a farmer's market is a UN plot? No, we don't think it's a UN plot. But when we see sustainable development, we see money being implemented from the federal and state government to promote Agenda 21, then we say it's coming right from the UN. Yes, that's true. But being implemented locally. Another thing that came out of the Rio conference was the biodiversity treaty, which thankfully was shot down by Congress, by the Senate. You see a map put up by Dr. Michael Kaufman, who's a friend of ours. He and a few of his colleagues got a copy of the treaty, which the Senate didn't even have. They were going to vote on a treaty without even reading the whole thing. And by reading the treaty, they put together what the United States would look like when this treaty is completely in effect. And the red would be, on this map, were areas that are off limits to humans. Half of the United States would be pretty much UN areas, right? Off limits, green zones, right? You see New England there? You see a lot of Maine, that crown of Maine there? That's the largest chunk of private property in the east of the Mississippi, I think, today, privately sectored, and they're trying to get it right now. The federal government is buying property in Errol on the Canadian border, Errol, New Hampshire. Become friendly with a lady who's a state rep in New Hampshire, and she said she's getting calls from people. They don't understand why is the federal government buying private land, and they're saying it's taking tax, property off the tax rolls. And she said, well, this is why. So the Senate said no to it, but it's being implemented anyway. And it's being done by land trusts, some non-government organizations, and I'll go into some of the different groups in a few minutes here. The yellow would be sort of highly regulated buffer zones. Very little activity, very little industry or anything else. And the black, you can't see the black dots too much, but if you go online, you see a better definition. When you blow something up too much, you can't really see it too well. But you see a lot of black dots, East Coast, in the central part of the country, West Coast. These would be the highly congested smart growth areas, okay? And this is an example on the right of this actually is in Portland, Oregon, which is really big into smart growth. What they do is they'll designate a certain part of a town or a city or a county as smart growth. This is where you can build, there'll be some industry maybe, and this is where the population will be living. But outside the smart growth area, very little. So you might buy into this and think this is going to be beautiful, I'll have that nice view of the mountain, there won't be a Walmart across the street, but then you want to build. Mumsy-in-law wants to move in, you see. Or maybe you want to put a patio out, and they'll say, sorry, this is a conservation restricted area. They've actually done this to Shutesbury out in western Massachusetts.
Being promoted every month by the Boston Foundation.
That's right, and I'll go on to land trust. Now, what you see on the left is a typical suburban tract. And if I was here to promote Agenda 21, and you were listening to me, and I'm trying to convince you to be one of my good disciples, I would say, okay, students, tell me what's wrong with the picture on the left. And you would say, well, Professor Shurtleff, it's obvious. Single-family homes, backyards, that means lawnmowers and barbecues, because the EPA has said that carbon dioxide is a pollutant. And a lawnmower, right, or a barbecue has to be out. And you see driveways, well, you put cars on driveways, don't you? And I'm sure there are a lot of other problems with this picture. And the solution, of course, are these federally subsidized, stack them and pack them, small apartments. Now, free market, yeah, some people may want to live in a small apartment. You know, you may be single, maybe you're widowed, or what have you, or maybe the kids have moved away, and that's fine. Let the free market build these things, not the public sector. I was in New Hampshire, to give you an example, in Nashua, to give you a clear example of this. Nashua is an Italy town. It's a member of this UN entity, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. And they went to City Hall and looking for evidence. I've been visiting city halls and town halls all around the region, as far as Michigan and Indiana, all over New England, looking for evidence to show when I do these presentations. I don't want to show you from a couple of books, and I want to show you some on the earth, on the ground, so to speak, evidence. I find a whole lot of it, and it's not that difficult to find, by the way. So I'm in Nashua. I go to the city hall. This would be last summer, summer of 2011, I should say. And I see Green Team. I see a banner, a poster that says Green Team. Now, what's wrong? Hey, Green Team. What's that about? When you become an Agenda 21 city, ICLEI or Green Communities, they establish what they call green teams. They could be high school or college kids or even older. They go around and they do energy audits. They go around to see what you're doing. Are you recycling? How about your practices, right? In communist countries, they're called Committees for the Defense of the Revolution. We're not going to be that vulgar. We're going to call them green teams because we're trying to save the planet and save the world. So I take a walk down Main Street and I find a storefront called Renaissance Downtowns. And I thought, gee, what's this? I saw these huge maps of Nashua, New Hampshire, blown up maps. That got my attention. I had my little trusty camera with me. And I walked in there, a nice young lady came up to me, and I asked her if she's ever heard of Agenda 21. She said she'd never heard of it. I invited her to the presentation we did a few weeks later. They didn't show up, by the way. Then I took a look to my right, and I see this big easel. What is Smart Growth? And I said, this organization is promoting Agenda 21 in Nashua. It's a private corporation. Renaissance Downtowns. Do a search for them. They're based out of Long Island, and they may have a project here. They have projects all over the United States. And I asked this very nice young lady, probably in her mid-20s, I said, how are you being funded? Oh, she said federal and state money and a little bit of private sector money. And they have a huge project going on. And 2 weeks later, when I showed this, one of the ladies in the room said, yeah, they come to the hearings at the City Hall and they say, we have too many single-family homes. We don't want to build any more single-family, as this corporation should have the say of what's built. I won't go. Benefit corporations, this is still a logical thread here. This is one of the entities, a new layer of law that states have embraced that will certify green corporations, from a Kool-Aid stand to a contractor, that if you're certified green, if your state becomes a benefit corporation state, that in order to get a contract at the government level, at state level, maybe even private sector level, you have to be certified green. And so Massachusetts has not yet become a benefit corporation state. There's about 7 or 8 states that are, including Vermont, New Jersey, Hawaii, Virginia. It passed in New Jersey unanimously. And both houses and the governor signed it, Governor Christie, right? Not any opposition. And there's a lot of opposition to Agenda 21 in New Jersey, but they've never heard of this. I spoke to one of the activists down there, and he said, what the, I don't want to say, is a benefit corporation? You better find out, because your state just signed on to it. So keep an eye out, benefitcorporation.net. Keep an eye out for that group. Here is what I refer to as the swastika of Agenda 21. In my travels, I found this in Maine, at the state capitol. We've had a lot of success in Maine fighting this. And this was a little booklet, and I opened up what got my attention was the booklet, the front of the booklet said sustainable development. And I said, open it up, and I saw this. So wherever you see these three circles, economy, community, environment, quality of life, all sound great. It might be in a different language if you're in Europe or in China or what have you, but that's the Agenda 21. I just got a picture of a Cranberry website, and they have this on there. So, yep, that's what. Now, I'm not saying that it's a UN, that Cranberry's a UN plot, but they bought into it because they have this. They may not know where it stems from, but it's on there, okay? I mean, if I put a swastika on if I write something, put a swastika on it, I may not know what a swastika means, but when I see that swastika, I say, hey, you know what that means, don't you? Well, no, it looks nice, it's a decoration. Well, it means that you're a Nazi, you support, oh, Nazis, I didn't know that. I guess today's education, you don't even know that.
That's right.
Yeah, so I can also say it's the hammer and sickle of the environmental movement, either one. Let me skip over here. Here's an example of a green company, Consigli Contractors. Proud to be one of New England's leading green contractors since 1905, right? If you're in a recession, you own a company, you have to maximize your resources, don't you? Of course you're not going to waste things. But why do you got to put that on your sign? Because you want to get the contracts. They built the new Dedham High School, a green high school in a green community. The building in Stackham and Packham and Worcester might be finished with it, right by the DCI, or DCI Center, DCI Center. Was it DCU?
DCU.
DCU, it used to be the Worcester Centrum, I think, yeah. I communicated with the two brothers who now run the company, and I don't think that they're Al Gore devotees at all. I think it's just public relations. I think they obviously might be committed to the environment, nothing wrong with that, but they put that on there for a reason. And so when you see that, that's an indication that that they need to make payroll. That's probably why they have it. A friend of mine has a son whose company makes windmills, the small ones, the private sector, no federal money involved, state money. They're about $30,000 a piece. You see them on farms, you see them in some businesses. He said, Dad, my clients don't care if these things work. They're about $30,000 a piece. They just want to show their customers they're going green. He said, why don't you just make fake ones? Oh, we can sell the fake ones, and they'd be happy to have them. Because they're a pain in the neck to maintain, too. So let's get into ICLEI. I got to make the correction, ICLEI, although I think LI would be more appropriate. The International Council for Local and Environmental Initiatives. So, Agenda 21 came out in 1992. This organization was founded 2 years prior, and no doubt wrote most of Agenda 21. There's another organization, it's called the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. This organization goes back a number of years. They're also big advocates. You've heard of that, I'm sure you'll laugh. So these are the entities that write all these things. Someone has to write this stuff, and Al Gore is not writing this, by the way. He might be promoting it, but he's not writing it. So ICLEI, founded at the UN headquarters in 1990, their job was to implement Agenda 21 worldwide by the cities and towns at the local level. So it's called International Council for Local Environmental Initiative, Local Governments for Sustainability. That sounds all nice and good, doesn't it? Other people around the world are opposing this. In Canada, they're opposing it. Here's I refer to him as Herr Bürgermeister, Konrad Otto Zimmermann. He's the General Secretary. And I say, well, what's this got to do with Quincy? Quincy is a green community. Quincy does not belong to ICLEI, but they're using ICLEI software, or at least have access to it. And ICLEI will not come in and shoot you if you don't implement Agenda 21. People in your town are embracing it, gladly embracing their guidelines. I won't go over the leadership, but I bet you there aren't too many people in Quincy that know anyone in ICLEI, any public, any unelected. They're not elected, by the way. And when Quincy joined the green communities, there was no vote in the ballot. There was no debate. Maybe your selectman or your councilman may have voted on it, right? Why is ICLEI wrong? Well, first off, it's a UN creation. It's like Frankenstein's monster. On its very face, it's wrong. But why is it wrong for a town to belong to ICLEI? No, they can make a mistake. It's democracy. They can join if they want. Well, we have something called the Constitution. I made reference to that earlier in the presentation. It gets in the way of some of these totalitarians, doesn't it? Article 1, Section 10 says that no state can enter into a treaty, an alliance, or a confederation. Well, ICLEI is not a non-government organization. It is a government-to-government. Some people, I think, mistakenly refer to it as an NGO, a UN-sponsored NGO. That's bad enough. this is a government-to-government organization, okay? And it's against the Constitution. And if we had an Attorney General at the federal level that was the constitutionalist, he or she would order a cease and desist to every governor, saying that within 24 hours, these towns will get out, or we'll take action here, take legal action. But of course, our current Attorney General is too busy running guns into drug lords into Mexico and covering his tracks to worry about the Constitution or enabling illegal aliens to break the law in Arizona. There's also another part of the Constitution I didn't mention here, Article 4, Section 4. And of course, we all know what that is. It says that all states are guaranteed a what kind of government? A Republican. Okay, that doesn't mean political parties. That meant ruled by law, right? That the rights of the minority, and it doesn't necessarily mean an ethnic minority, cannot be harmed by the whims of the majority. If you belong to green communities or ICLEI, you cannot be a Republican. You do not have a Republican form of government. You have an environment, I refer to it as environmental ocracy, okay? There are about 1,200 members around the world. We did have over 600 in the United States. Many are getting out. Westchester County New York just got out. Will get out as January 1st. And Alabama, their governor signed a law kicking the whole rotten, stinking Agenda 21 out of the whole state. Okay? Maine, you see a handful of Maine, Pennsylvania. These are all the states, some of the states I visited. Yeah, I want to mention it. You say, well, New Hampshire, it's only 4 in New Hampshire. Oh, that's good. That means it's a conservative state and they're fighting it. Well, not really. They've got something called Granite State Future. This makes it more insidious. And they've got Republican conservatives going around working for the federal government through HUD, pushing Agenda 21, and half the towns have signed, agreements to participate. Thankfully, people are waking up, and we've got a lot of opposition in New Hampshire. And Rochester, I was up there back in early September, said no to these folks. And there was 100 people in that room. That wouldn't have happened a year ago, because most people a year ago didn't even know anything about it. So let me just go into Connecticut, Massachusetts, here in Massachusetts, okay. Massachusetts has about 27. We had 33 left in the last year. Waltham, Carver, and what was that town up there? Exit 28 off 128, somewhere. That town up there, I forget the name of the town, but they left sometime last year. But we have something that I think is even worse. It's called green communities. There's 103. That's about a third. This is the map. You can go onto the Green Communities Massachusetts website, and a number of them just signed up this past January. And Quincy, Boston is ICLEI and Green Communities. You've got Marshfield. You can see some of the, most of them sit right around Greater Boston. And what makes this even worse is because most people have no idea that it's even come to town. Now, when you become a green community, you get an educational toolbox that will be given to all students. And this is their paradox. Highly educated people who have higher incomes consume more resources than poorly educated people who tend to have lower incomes. That must have taken $1 million study to come up with that one, right? In this case, more education increases the threat to sustainability. So what does that mean? Does it mean dumb people down so they can't make a lot of money? Yeah. I think people who have more money tend to be better stewards. That's why they have the money, and they're not going to waste it. In countries like Haiti, they have to use dung for energy. I had a chance to interview the former president of CORE, Congress on Racial Equality, Roy Innis. By the way, was a scientist in his own right. He's got Parkinson's disease. His son now runs it. But he and a French scientist, Paul Reiter, were able to reintroduce DDT into some African countries. And he said to me in his interview, which is on YouTube, he said, Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, needs energy. They need coal energy. They need oil. They need access to energy. He said, because they still have a very low life expectancy. And by the way, you can say that coal and oil are actually green energy. You say, well, heck, that's ridiculous. No, I know you really flipped your lid. Well, 100 years ago, the forest of New England were about 80% depleted. Today, they've come back. It's 80-20 instead of 20-80. Why is that? Because we don't need to use wood like we used to. Now, I know coal and oil do have their negative, all energy has its negative aspects, but could you imagine if we were still using wood? Could you imagine if our grandparents and great-grandparents bought into this stuff then? They would never develop coal and oil, right? So, and you don't think that taking solar, these big batteries, they do a lot of clear mining in Canada to get some of the minerals or the things needed to make these batteries. So, so coal and oil were and are a green technology in many respects. Department of Energy comes out by saying that we must advance the sustainability movement through education. The kids don't know how to read and write. They have a second grade level reading, most people. They don't do a whole lot of reading. They learn this look-say method, but they're going to be green. Every school in the country is pushing this. And by the way, Ron Paul, man who ran for president, congressman, he was a congressman for his first cycle in Congress back in the late 70s. Jimmy Carter advanced the Department of Education to a cabinet level position, thanks to the NEA, National Education Association, was one of the big thrusts. By the way, are we better off since we've had a cabinet level, Department of Education? Are we better off or a whole lot worse off? You're a whole lot worse off, right? Anyway, he submitted a bill, Ron Paul, to change the name of the Department of Education to the Department of Public Education. What's the acronym? DOPE. It didn't pass, but he got his message through, okay? I was in Chelmsford, Massachusetts, spoke there to a Republican Party group. You know, 5 years ago, you wouldn't find many John Birches at Massachusetts Republican Party groups. We have a very liberal Republican Party, as you know, as you must, by listening to Scott Brown's commercial, you know, promoting socialism and abortion and what have you. Let the children guard what the sires have won. Yes, the Minutemen at Chelmsford marched and fought in the Battle of Concord, right? And I said, Chelmsford is an Italy town, and I said, well, folks, you've let them down. You didn't guard what the sires have won. You need to take action and get this out of your town. These are some maps you see. These are some evidence when you go to your town hall and city hall. Some of it's pretty overt, some of it isn't. This was in Chelmsford. Uncle Sam wants you to add green to your red, white, and blue, right? And they tell you that these light bulbs save energy. Your recycling saves the earth, but they're also hazardous waste. You know, dangerous stuff. Dedham, just a few towns away, going back to the 1600s, right? One of the oldest towns in Massachusetts. I walked into Dedham Town Hall I guess it was last spring, and I looking for evidence of Ickley in Agenda 21. I didn't have to look very hard. I didn't have to go there in the middle of the night and take a little microfiche, a little camera, like the Watergate break-in, you know. There was this gigantic check. When Dedham became a green community, they got this nice check. Now, we weren't getting any answers from the selectmen in Dedham, and I live in West Roxbury, right next to Dedham. I'm in Dedham all the time. I have a lot of friends. We have members of the John Birch Society in Dedham. No answers from anybody. We never heard of it. We know nothing about it. Well, we had a little campaign to bring out an awareness. This is Mother Brook. Mother Brook is the oldest canal in the country, and parts of it are pretty filthy. And you would think a green community would be spotless. There should be no litter in any green community. It should be completely spotless. Well, the minute Obama was sworn in, this stuff should have just vaporized and disappeared, right? But it didn't. It's still there. So the right-wingers we had a free market cleanup, and we got a lot of junk out of here, and we got a little media attention. And I got the name of the lady, Virginia LeClaire, probably a very nice 34-year-old lady. She's got a degree from UMass in environmental affairs. She was the one hired by the town to be the environmental officer. And I said, and this was in an email exchange, how did Dedham become a member of Ickley? Most of the time I'm saying, we don't even know what this is. The selectmen say, never heard of it. If they bother to acknowledge you, the city of Boston, none of the council members will even acknowledge that it exists. Menino brought it in, by the way, in 2000, 2001. Anyway, she said, I and the Dedham Sustainable Advisory Board that she appointed went to the selectmen and said, we need to bring this in. And they did. It wasn't voted on, and today Dedham is really an environmental ocracy. And this nice little young lady, this ideologue, I don't think she's an evil conspirator. I think she's an ideologue. She's an activist with some authority. Remember that old Eddie Murray movie? You know, A black guy with a badge, your worst kind of a nightmare? Because this guy has a badge too, and he's not a nightmare. He's a good guy. He was going against some rednecks, Well, if you're a property owner and you love freedom, your worst kind of nightmare is an environmentalist with a badge, okay? And and again, when they hire these people, they're not hiring civil servants, know how to type, know how to answer the phone. We're looking for hardcore activists with authority. Now you have authority all over the country, okay? Newburyport, Greenfield, Marshfield, I actually confronted in a very polite manner Rocco Longo, the man who brought it into Marshfield. Doesn't even live in Marshfield, by the way. And my ancestors settled Marshfield. Were the early settlers. And I tried to hand him one of these. I'm not interested, he snapped it. Well, you don't have to be rude. I'm not being rude, I'm just not interested. So I got his business card and I went online and looked at his background. International this, international that. And it's all about fighting global warming. We've got a copy of the resolve here that was passed. A full member, Cities for Climate Protection campaign. Folks, there is no man-made global warming. And even if there were, if we shut down our nation, everything, it would have no impact because countries like China, Brazil, and India have doubled their usage of electricity, energy, and they're using coal and oil for the most part. So all of you environmentalists watching this, look and see what China is doing and these other folks. So you can use all the recycle. You can recycle everything. And you can go green. It's not going to have any impact whatsoever to man-made global warming. Kingston, with its wind turbines, one of them doesn't work anymore. But don't worry, it's under warranty. And by the way, they're actually shutting some of these things down. Some in Falmouth because you have this wind turbine syndrome. The it gives us low frequency sound. It makes making people sick. And so Kingston goes green, and here's an application to join the Nation Conservancy. If you go to Kingston, I don't see an application to join the NRA at Kingston Town Hall or join the John Birch. Well, I did leave some John Birch literature there, by the way. The point is, these town halls still belong to us too. It's not just the Greenies. We need to have influence in these town halls, in city halls, in schools, and what have you. And libraries. Put your material in these libraries, folks, because this is a great place to leave information. Wellesley, Green Community, Ickley, they have a full-time environmental officer. The money's coming from the Obama bailout bucks. The Bush bailout went to the corporations. The Obama bailout mostly went to governments. And recycling, let me touch upon recycling. When it's market-driven, it's a good thing. You can actually take stuff that's thrown away and make money out of it. If I put my recyclable stuff and someone's making money, shouldn't I be making money? Right now, the city's making money, right? But some recycling is a waste, actually a waste of energy. More energy is taken out, to recycle something. So it depends, and most of it is wasteful. But we feel very good about it when we recycle, don't we? Right? I went to the Midwest, Indiana, where they tell me, you crazy people in Massachusetts, you're a bunch of crazy liberals. We don't have this stuff here. Oh no? Indianapolis Office of Sustainability, and they have this propaganda for children. And I remember the young lady that was passing this out in downtown Indianapolis had never heard of Agenda 21. Well, we had plenty of information for her. Nice young lady. I was in Columbus, Ohio. Same thing, back in December. We don't have the problems here. Yeah, have you heard of Sustainable Columbus? Go to the website. Those are the bad guys. So the ones that are setting policy for your city. Rhode Island, Sustainable Rhode Island, right? Land trusts, NGOs. An NGO, the term is a generic term, right? But the United Nations will acknowledge certain organizations as non-government organizations certified by the UN. You must agree to the ideals enshrined, that's their term, in the UN Charter. They never say the ideals enshrined in the U.S. Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, but the UN Charter, that's enshrined. That's sacred writ. Like the covenant, what do we call it? The earth. You remember you guys found it in a closet? It was supposed to be the earth, the ark of hope. It was a perversion of the Ark of the Covenant. Yeah. Well, all the sacred scrolls of the earth were there, right? Are fraud and a hoax. Well, anyway, the land trust or another entity. Some land trusts do good work. Some of them are collaborating with various Agenda 21 entities and grabbing land and cheating people and flipping the land trust, flipping the conservation easements, giving it back selling it to the government. Here is the president of the Nature Conservancy, Mark Tursek. Guess what banking concern he's from? Yeah, Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs were the ones that were going to sell. The entity was going to sell the carbon credits had Congress passed the carbon tax entity. They would have made money off this hoax, big money. And Goldman Sachs, by the way, gives money to both candidates at the level. And by the way, most of these big corporations give money to everybody, you know, and what they give most of the money to are the ones that they prefer, right? So that's just how they work. But Mark Tursek also belongs to an organization called the Council on Foreign Relations. I don't have time to go into a lot of this, but it is one of the powerful, probably the most powerful private organization in the United States. They're the ones that promote this stuff. They're the ones that gave us the UN CFR. I do have some information on the table about it. So there's a great book called The Shadows of Power by James Shurtleff. If you read that book, if you're not familiar with this organization, you will never look at political events again with the same set of eyes, I guarantee it. Okay? Nature Conservancy is supposed to restore, or safeguard the earth, safeguard the environment, right? But here's a postcard I have, empower women, and there's a lady swimming there, as you can maybe make it up. Now, I'm in favor of empowering women. I've got a wife and I've got 4 daughters. I want to see them grow up in a free country where the rights of all people are respected, right? But what do they mean when they say empower women? Well, you look at Agenda 21, and I mentioned a little when I started, you know, how it's our job to make sure that the chores in the household are even done by men. See, what they want to do is destroy the traditional family. That's what it's about. You see, if you have more than 1.5 children, you are unsustainable. Unless you're Al Gore, you can have 5 or 6, that's okay. But the average family, having more than 4 or 5 children, might be more than 1.5, whatever a 0.5 child is. I know, the average child, I know what that means. But, so they try to encourage women maybe not to have traditional marriages. And there's a lot of other things that our government promotes, whatever I won't go into, but anything that does not promote the traditional nuclear family is promoting Agenda 21. Does our state promote something that maybe isn't part of the traditional family? Yes. And our federal government does too. Okay? Rhode Island Land Trust, Maine Land Trust. I think Maine has the 2nd most land trust. California has the most, and we're pretty close. And we're a small state, by the way. I think we have 1 land trust for every 2 towns. And it was 360 plus towns in Massachusetts. That's a lot of land trusts, right? Conservation, I'll skip that, but if you have a piece of land and you're considering a conservation easement, look at the fine line. You will lose your property rights. You will lose it. It's not worth it. Okay? Propaganda at all levels, yes, even the post office, because it's an arm of the federal government. I know, because I used to work for 5 years. It tells you in this piece of literature I got, it tells you to adjust the thermostat. I really need the government to tell me to adjust my thermostat. That's ridiculous, right? Like I'm stupid. I pay the bills. I'm gonna waste the electricity or waste the oil or what have you. Use public transportation. Well, that's all well and good if you happen to be living near it, or if it's convenient. If I'm going to be in Boston after midnight, it's not very convenient, and it may even be dangerous if you're not armed, right? I don't want my wife, my children riding public transportation after a certain hour. There's no way I would have them do that, right? And they just doubled the rates on the commuter, not doubled, but the rates went up on the commuter rail. Well, for me, I live in West Roxbury, to travel to Boston, it's about, $11? How miles of driving to park? It's cheaper, especially if I take my family. So make it marketable, and maybe I'll do that. Oh yes, plant trees. Well, if I live in a stack of them, pack them, I don't have any land to plant trees. How am I going to plant trees? I need the government to tell me to plant trees. The same government that deforested Central America and South America and used napalm to defoliate Vietnam, they're going to tell me to plant trees. By the way, I planted a giant sequoia in my backyard. A redwood, it was about this big. And I got it in the redwood forest, and my mother-in-law said, but hell, it's going to be 1,000 feet. I said, don't worry, it's going to be 1,000 years before it gets that tall. Somebody will cut it down before that. We don't have to worry about it. Okay, here's an example. Fort Wayne, Indiana, I was there. Fort Wayne used to be an Indian town. They got out recently, but here is a donate your clothes to the earth goddess Gaia. See, back a couple of years ago, before the evil Columbus and the evil Cortez, I'm being facetious when I say that, the indigenous folk used to have human sacrifices, right? the captured tribes, they rip your hearts out, do some disgusting things. No, you don't do that anymore. Just give us your clothes. Sacrifice your used clothes to the earth goddess, to placate the earth goddess, right? By the way, there's nothing wrong with donating your clothes. I do that all the time, but I won't donate to these folks, by the way. And this is in the heartland, right? And Gaia is the earth goddess that people like Maurice Strong worship. They believe, no, that's their right to believe it, but that's what they believe, okay? Green communities in Dedham, if you become a green community, you get a solar compactor. You've probably seen these in Quincy, right? No, I've got something better than a solar compactor. It's called a foot. That's what I've been using to compact my trash. And I make a big deal of it. And a funny aside, humorous aside, they had one in front of the library. The two libraries in Dedham, they put these in front. People were throwing their books away. They thought these were book repositories, right? So they had to put signs. This is not a trash barrel. So I can say with a straight face, Agenda 21 is also anti-intellectual. It promotes book burning, you see. They since removed them. I did a little video clip. I don't know if it had anything to do with it, but it is sort of laughable that they both thought they were trash and they're throwing their books in the trash can. Well, I'm running out of time here, and you've been a very good. Let me just go a little bit at Agenda 21 in action, okay? I can make a list 10 times the size of this. I mentioned the wind turbines, the solar panels, all these policies, Agenda 21. 40% of our corn crop is now put in our gas tanks, Agenda 21. Farmers are actually chopping trees down in the Midwest. I was out in Indiana, a lot of corn out there, so they can plant more corn because they're guaranteed to get a lot of federal money for the crop, and the price of food goes up. And who's hurt the hardest by this, right? Poor folks, right? Agenda 21 says it wants to elevate everyone, high standard of living. Well, they're lying to us when they say that, right? Even the U.S. Navy is becoming sustainable, right? In Massachusetts, we have something that's a pending bill that will completely rezone the whole state to address Agenda 21. It's called CLERP, Comprehensive Land Use Partnership Act. I forget what the R stands for. CLERP or Nickley sounds like a Japanese horror movie, but it's a lot worse than a bad Class B Japanese horror movie, by the way. Unregulated regional planning commissions will control the future. They will dictate. Your city councils will have no authority. And one of the best arguments to get out of green communities is say, look, once you adopt this, you can get out, but once you adopt it, you have to go by their policies. They set the policies, you implement them. You have no control. Chicopee just said no to it for the same reason. A few other towns have shut it down because they said we can't afford it and we don't want to go into it because we'll lose our authority under our charter. Okay? How about a mileage tax? Yeah, you pay excise tax, you pay taxes on gas as it is, I guess some places it's been implemented, like in California. You have to report how many miles you drive. So if you do that, you may either lie about it or not drive as much. That's part of the problem. They want you off the roads. Okay? How about a smart meter? Oh, it's going to be so much more efficient, but we're going to let you know if you're using too much electricity, and we may even have a warrant for we may even have a search warrant if you're using a lot more than your neighbors because you may have an illegal business. Or maybe you've got some people we don't know about living there, you see. It's happening, folks, okay? A trash police, yeah, you can have people going around finding you if you don't recycle. It's already happening. How about a flush tax? Yeah. You flush your toilet, you pay a tax, a special tax. I remember a number of years ago, somebody from the water and sewer department came to the house and they gave me a little piece of rubber like this that I was supposed to put in my tank, right? Toilet tank. And it's supposed to block the water, so when the tank fills back up, it doesn't fill up all the way. What happens? You have to flush it 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
So I actually waste energy. So there's stupid policies to feel good about. And I didn't feel very good about it when I would flush 2 or 3 times, right? Roads would be, green codes. A green code or a stretch code, which now would be implemented in Quincy. So when you want to sell your house, if you're not green communities compliant, you have to be up to their standards. A lot of it's wasteful and ridiculous and foolish. So your wiring is not up to Agenda 21 standards. You will have to do that to sell your house, or you'll have to sell it at a very low level. Okay, if you want to build, you see the M&T Bank going green. I think they're building one here in Quincy or Milton. I was driving by. They built one just in West Roxbury. Well, the fact that you're building is not green. It should be turned into a pasture or a forest. But you're going green because you have to, because the codes say you have to. Okay, and again, you're going to build something. It should be efficient. I don't have to tell where I'm going green. Just, good sense. And I've talked to engineers and and other people will say how these things are a waste of money, it's a fraud, and someone's making money off this thing here, but not the people.
$150 a month for water and sewer down at the new Navy base.
Really?
Yeah, new development down there.
Idling laws. Massachusetts, you can't idle more than 5 minutes, right? Policeman. I don't know if you give too many people citations, but it's on the books, right? Other states too, and towns and counties and cities do this, right? How about our manufacturing? A lot of manufacturing at one point in this country. No, I'm not saying it's all Agenda 21. A lot of it was bad trade policies and other policies here. When was the last time you see a factory open up where they actually made something, where real wealth is created? Yeah, they're opening up factories, but they're not in this country.
They closed the light bulb factory.
What's that?
They closed the light bulb factory.
And here in
Family
Quincy?
business.
Yeah, that's right. And they're probably now making these things, they're making these things in China. Your property taxes will go up, and maybe your property values will go down if you're on the outside of a smart growth area. And if you all say, I don't own any land, it doesn't affect me, well, your rent's going to go up, okay? But really, the lack of local state control, that's really the bottom line. Loss of sovereignty. And of course, public and private schools are pushing this stuff to a fairly well. What to do about it? Number of success stories. I have to really move along here. We've had over 100 towns and cities and counties and even a state pull out of Agenda 21 within the last year. Smart meter decision in Maine was successfully challenged in court and won. There's resolutions and bills in other parts of the country been introduced. I mentioned Arizona, Tennessee, Alabama bans ICLEI from the state, and all Agenda 21, and many other places around the country. And the last one I said, what about your city, your town, or your county? You're watching this, you better take action. You're in this room, you live in Quincy, you live in Boston, wherever you live. And if you don't live in an ICLEI town or a green community, you've got 4 full-time people in Massachusetts that do nothing but lobby local officials to push it. And they're using your money. So you better get this information. You can do it in person. That's what I recommend. You can. I recommend seeing them because they're supposed to work for you, right? So what can you do? Spread the word and tell the people. Carver, Massachusetts. This is a great example. Last spring, I got a copy of this article. I put it up in a PDF format. I was able to link it to my Facebook page. I went to my Facebook and I said, Carver happens to be in Hinckley Town. It was until people fought it. And I thought Carver has a weekly newspaper, the Carver Reporter. So I posted it and I said, you guys should investigate this. Well, they gave me an interview, myself and a friend of mine. It was ran in the newspapers. It was pretty good. And then I said, how about the Carver Republican Party? Yeah, what the heck? I found there was a Carver Republican Party on Facebook. And I posted this article and I said, you folks should look into this because Carver's an Hinckley town. I did it purposely. What's Hinckley? Well, a lady who runs the group, she read it. And she said, I never heard of this, but it explains everything. Well, just last night, they voted against passing a UN resolution. One of the lady who brought it in, ICLEI in, she was voted out last year. Within a week of our presentation down there, ICLEI was kicked out of town. So this can happen everywhere if people just take a little bit of time and effort to make it happen. So inform your elected officials and those that are running for office. Even if they don't have a chance of winning, let them know about it, okay? Opinion molders, the local reporter for the weekly newspaper, the Quincy Sun, should know about this. They should investigate. Newspapers used to investigate these things. The Herald and the Globe. Oh, I should have mentioned the bottled water ban in Concord too, by the way. Concord is an Hinckley town, and they banned the sale of this little bottle here. January 1st, and the state of Massachusetts approved of it, right? Because Massachusetts loves it. And you think Poland Spring? Oh, they're fighting it all right, but they're awesome. Right on here, be green. Smaller caps, more green, right? They better start using their money to fight these people because they're going down. First it's the light bulbs, now it's the water bottles. You see, what's next, right? Our freedoms, more important than the water bottles or what have you. How about if you host a meeting like this in your area, or how about even in your home? Get one of these little DVDs for a whole $1 and invite some of your friends. What about the civic groups you belong to? You can pass resolutions condemning Agenda 21. It doesn't have to be at a town level, it could be your group. Whatever group you're, Rotary Club or what have you, right? How about if you're on internet, spread this information. All this information is available on cyberspace. There is all kinds of great stuff out there. Email this stuff to the elected officials, to your friends. If you belong to Facebook or some of the other social networks, post this stuff up there and put a worm on that hook. Don't just say, "Here's, you gotta watch this." Hey, if you want more information, contact this guy. This is a crazy guy who lives in Boston, talks about this stuff all the time. Put my name out there. Put the jbs.org out there. We want people to know and a place to go. Lots of people will come to us if they know there's a place to go. Other people that think the way they think. And I get contacts from all over the country, even in Canada, other parts of the world, right? How about joining the John Birch Society? We have a local chapter. We're not big enough. If we were big enough, there would never be a green community in Quincy. We had more active members. I think if Carver had a chapter down there, they would have never seen green communities down there, or Igloo. We advise you to, well, we start an ad hoc committee, okay? Local Quincy citizens for property rights or for freedom. Doesn't have to be anti, it could be a pro thing, right? I would suggest go to jbs.org to get petitions, to get how-to manuals, video clips, all kinds of great resources. And again, get involved with John Falls, a guy from Milton, and we have a local chapter that meets at the Weymouth Library. Contact us, and you can join tonight. There's applications right over there. And if you're watching this, go to jbs.org or contact me directly. Hal Shurtleff, West Roxbury, I'm on Facebook, and my email address is shurtleffhal@aol.com. shurtleffhal@aol.com. With that, I want to thank you. I just want to show you an example of activism. We have a local chapter in my home in West Roxbury, not a very big group, but we try to be busy. June 14th, there was a Flag Day parade in Dedham, and we had a little float. This, by the way, is my good friend. This is a cutout of Fred Pullmich, a John Birch member who's also an Uncle Sam reenactor. He'd be a good guy to get on the show when he's ever in the area. And I said, "Fred, I'm going to have you." I know he was doing something on Flag Day in Albany, but that's okay. He was in our parade too. And my friend Tom Moore from Dedham was behind the wheel. We got a couple of banners made up, free. A friend of mine donated them. And my family and a few others were in front of the vehicle, passing out things like the Constitution, passing out these things and these things. And who was in front of us? Was the Agenda 21 float. It was the Dedham Sustainable Advisory Committee. They had a gigantic truck. We just had a big Suburban. They had a truck 10 times our size. They had a young lady who was passing a little feet, carbon footprint. When she saw us, though, she got very busy because we were having a good impact. We had a lot of fun. And these are the kinds of things we need to do on a regular basis, and we are doing it on a regular basis. Let's do something here in Quincy. They don't belong to Igloo, although Igloo is in town through green communities. And I love to do these kinds of things, and if you guys want to help out, let's do it. With that, I want to thank you. Thank the local cable company for coming in and videotaping this, and all those who made this happen. And with that, God bless you, and I'll be happy. We're kind of running late. We need to be out of here soon, but I'll be happy to take any questions sort of off the podium. And with that, I'm going to shut down my computer and shut down my projector because I'm going green and I'm saving the planet and saving myself lots of money because these bulbs are expensive. That was an hour and, my goodness, an hour and 50 minutes.
Thank you very much for watching the show. I hope you were informed a little bit tonight, but as I said in the beginning of the show, there will be more shows to come, approximately about 6 more after this. Again, I ask you, at some point in time, please call your city councilor. Tell them you do not want the City of Quincy no longer to be involved in Agenda 21 or in the green movement here in the City of Quincy. Again, I hope you enjoyed the show, and I'd like to thank the people here at Quincy Access Television for allowing me to do these shows. Thank you very much for watching. Good night.